Okay, the next video in the course is going to look at magical times. Times of year, the calendar, times of day, all that kind of stuff, because this is quite an important consideration when looking at ritual work. Okay, we're going to start off big and go dinky. So big, let's start off with the magical year. Typically in modern paganism, we celebrate 8 festivals. Not everyone. Some people celebrate 4, some people celebrate all 8, some people only celebrate a couple. Depends what path you go with. You know, it can vary from person to person. You know, if you haven't dedicated yourself to any specific path yet, it's probably a good idea to sort of take a look at them all, work with them, see what feelings you get from them, which ones you decide you work best with. Okay. At the beginning of the year, at the beginning of February, we have Immelk. Traditionally, when spring starts, obviously if you're in the southern hemisphere, sorry, you can just flip a lot of these round. Sort of the start of the season ones, obviously you would celebrate the reverse end of it. When autumn starts, a lot of these sort of names and things come from sort of what we call sort of Pentecostal writings. When monks came over to Christianize us in the UK. Wasn't UK at the time, but you know, you get where I'm going with this. And a lot of them come from sort of ancient Irish texts and things like that. So a lot of them, the names are sort of based on the times of year as they were experienced in Britain. Obviously, you know, you don't. It would make no sense if you're living in the southern hemisphere or the other side of the world to celebrate them as they were in Britain. But that's where the names come in. This is traditionally why they're there. So Immelk, traditionally seen as the start of spring, certainly the marker of a start of a seasonal period. The 4 of the holidays which don't land on solstices or equinoxes are usually seen as seasonal start points. So obviously, again, depending on where you are in the world, seasons will start slightly differently at different times based on your geographical area and things like that. So, but that's where we are. So the first one's Immelk. Then we come to what is an equinox. Northern hemisphere would be spring, southern hemisphere autumn, and that's Westra. Comes in around the 21st, 23rd-ish of March. Obviously equinoxes can have a bit of a wobble between a few days every year. Again, sort of typically it's called Westra because of the writings of the Venerable Bede. Not everyone calls it Westra because some people thought you just made it up. Big debate point, but yeah, typically now modernly known as Westra. Historically, we might just call it the equinox. I'm not sure. But that's the next one. Then we're back to a seasonal start day, which is Beltane, which is seen as one of the really big festivals, like especially in European witchcraft, if you like. Beltane basically means bright fire, blessed fire. Big fire festival day, and you know, it falls around the 1st of May. It's still a bank holiday in the UK, which is quite cool. Lots of the big public pagan festivals you get on Beltane. And for a lot of people, it's the first one I went to. It's the first holiday I celebrated many years ago. You know, it's an inception festival. It's the start of things. It's put things into action. It's a fertility festival, so. Then we have Nissa, which is a solstice day, summer solstice. You know, huge midsummer, it's also called. Falls in slap sort of 20th, 22nd of June time. Big day for Felo and Fairy Law is midsummer. Then we have Lammas, hitting on the 1st of August. Again, seasonal start point, start of autumn, or spring, depending where you are. In the UK, it's the start of autumn. Bread festival of bread, because it is one of the. Again, this is a bit difficult if you're not in the UK, but originally, certainly in European witchcraft, seen as one of the first sort of the harvest festivals. There are 3 harvest festivals. Next one being Mabon, which is the autumn equinox. Again, it's typically called Mabon. There's a big lot of debate as to where that name came from. Again, it's one of these things that's gone in folklore. It might just be made up. So, yeah, Whatever you want to call it, falls on the equinox, second of the harvest festivals. After that we have Samhain, which again is another one of the biggies. Start of winter, seasonal start point, falls on 31st of October, now typically celebrated in non-pagan culture as Halloween. Again, one of the big dates on the calendar. A lot of people celebrate it in a number of different ways. There's loads of different ways to celebrate Samhain, depending on where in the world you are and what your path is. And then we get to the winter solstice, modern paganism, known as Yule. Again, you know, solstice point. So those are the 8 holidays which construct the modern pagan calendar. I'm not going to give you a 2-hour lecture in this film as to the historical merits and accuracies of all of them. We could be here for days. You know, it is like that. You know, you can search for tons on them. Obviously, you've been asked at the start of this course to download a copy of Witchery. It gives you a little bit of a breakdown in there. As to sort of how they're celebrated in modern times. Obviously, the history of them all sort of varies. Like I say, a lot of them come from ancient texts, Pentecostal texts during the Christianization of Britain. Now, considering they were trying to get rid of paganism, they preserved a lot of our history, but it was quite nice. Just wish Bede had written down his source material. Drives me nuts. Anyway, so those are your 8 festivals, which kind of come up throughout the year. There is more historically written about some than others, but you know, for the focus of this video, there is sort of a historical context there to all of them, but for the purposes of this course, which is an introduction to rituals, we're going to look at them in the modern concept, because that's what's going to be most applicable to you as you get started in magic ritual. So that's where we're going to roll with. So yeah, these tend to be celebrated quite widely. If you look at open rituals in your area, which I'd recommend everyone does, even though hedge-witchery is a massively solitary path, and I am most definitely a solitary practitioner, I go to a lot of open rituals because they're really good fun. And also they're a really good place to share ideas. You can find there's a lot of talks on at them. It's a really good place to go to. They're really good places to go to lots of workshops and just kind of expand your understanding of your practice, you know. It gives you some new insights and stuff. So yeah, and everyone needs the support of their community, so open rituals are a brilliant thing to do, and you tend to find open rituals for all of these things. So have a look in your local area. You'll find some open rituals if you're looking for them. Best place to start is, there's always the social media networks, Facebook. Usually check out paganism in your local area, there'll be something advertised. If you're in the UK, which you know a lot of you are, Pagan Federation England and Wales, another really good place to start. The OBOD have sort of seed groups as well, another good place to check out. Yeah, but all the big pagan organisations normally have sort of little seed groups and regional or local things, so check out those guys' websites as well. Cool. Coming down from the sort of annual celebrations, if you like, the yearly calendar, and a lot of sort of mythology about these seasons is based on stories. You know, you can find them. There's the Wheel of the Year story. There's the Oak King and the Holly King. Yeah, there's hundreds. You know, there's the story of Hecate going wandering off, and not really wandering off. She kind of had a purpose, but you get where I'm going with this. There's a lot of different stories that kind of vocalise the mythology and folklore of the changing year within paganism. The one in Witchery you'll find is the standard sort of Wheel of the Year tale, if you like, but there are lots of them, so it's probably something to look for when you go and do research. Yeah, and find out which one fits best for your tradition, you know, because it's no good reading, you know, it's no good trying to relate to a story or mythology that doesn't fit with your practice. They're interesting to read, but, you know, married up to your understanding and your experience. Coming back from, taking a step back from sort of the annual Wheel of the Year, and looking at it on sort of a smaller scale. We then have the monthly cycle of the moon, which gets marked a lot within modern paganism. We kind of know it had some bearing historically as well. It makes sense that it did, because of how closely a lot of the other sort of celebrations and spiritual practices were linked with agriculture. There's the whole sort of planting by the phases of the moon movement, which is making a resurgence actually in a lot of sort of organic planting and farming communities. But we certainly know it had a bearing on agriculture, and if it had a bearing on agriculture, it was probably tied into spiritual life way back when. It's a good rule of thumb, to be honest. So that is there. The general thing about phases of the moon is that it is seen, you know, time of the in the simplest form, time of the full moon is when you get stuff, ask for stuff, and bring stuff in. New moons are when you get rid of stuff and get stuff out and clear it out of your life. Obviously, you have the waxing and waning in between. There are certain full moons and new moons of the year which get attributed like sort of special significance, if you like. Most of the moons, sort of all the moons every month, will have a name, if you like. There's a list of them in Witchery again, but there's loads of different ones, depending again where you are in the world, what your local tradition is going forward. So there's hundreds of different names for moons, all from different traditions and things, and usually to do with the time of year or the local festivals or customs at that time. There are sort of also other ones. You have the terms blue moon and dark moon used a lot as well. Now, again, your interpretation of when these occur can vary slightly. Blue moons are often celebrated in modern paganism as the second full moon occurring in a calendar month. If you study like sort of a reconstructionist path or an older path, like hedge-witchery, you would possibly mark them the way I do, which is the fourth full moon in a season. And then it depends on how you mark your seasons, because some people mark them on the seasonal change of a day, so which would be sort of Imelk, Beltane. How am I doing this? Imelk, Beltane, Lammas and Samhain. So between any of those 2 dates, if you get fourth one, would be a blue moon. The other way people mark them is fourth one between solstice or an equinox. That's how I mark them. Just because I do. But again, it's personal preference, it's path, it's belief, it's, you know, how it works for you. And then again, it's the same with black moons, basically the same thing, but with new moons. So it's like a rogue new moon. So either the second one in a month or fourth in a season. I've heard of people also celebrating it as the 13th one in a year. So 13th one sort of Yule to Yule, or Imelk to Imelk, or Beltane to Beltane, depending. So there's a few different ways on how to mark that. But certainly the moon phase is something that you want to consider and look at in ritualistic work. Going down from that, we also have times of day. Dawn, midday, dusk, midnight tend to be your 4 mark points on the day. There's nothing really hard and solid about this. You know, when you look at certain folklores and customs, there's traditions of certain spells being done at certain times of day. I tend to practice it as being very similar to the moon phases type thing. Dawn is the time for new ideas, new beginnings, new starts. Midday is your big sort of blessing time, your big time for, you know, celebrating an energy or trying to increase something that's been going on for a while and bring it into full sort of being. Dusk is a time when you're trying to close a chapter on something or trying to diminish something down. And midnight is the time when it's it's a time for, you know, complete sort of new starts, fresh starts, getting rid of old things that you really don't want there anymore. It's a banishing time. To be honest, I tend to do a lot of them at midnight because I really like doing things at midnight or dusk. Bit of a night owl. But everybody's different. And you will find kind of, you know, a lot of people tend to do all their magical work at a certain time of day or night. Just because they're naturally inclined to that. You know, you hear about morning people and night people. And magically you tend to have sort of an inclination as to the time of day you're more sort of awake as well. But that's true of everything. That's true of moon phases, and that's true of going back to the time of year, you know, as well. I'm very much, for me, it's all about equinoxes. I have no rhyme or reason to this. It is just equinoxes pull me in. There is a little bit of a historical tweak on an old sort of Western European writing or law that came about in the 13th century that mentions witches flying when day and night be equal, and obviously because of the hedge-witchery tie to flying and journeying. I think that might be it a bit, but just naturally quite drawn to the equinoxes. And you'll find you're drawn to specific festivals over other ones. You'll find you work better magically at certain times of day than others. It's just certain moon phases as well. Full moon, I'm useless. I do mark the full moon, but it's not good for me trying to do any specific work. I normally use it as a time for sort of giving thanks and just generally celebrating life. Because I get nothing practical done on a full moon. It needs to be a new moon, so you know, it's just experience and practice and finding what works with you. But I think the main thing I'm trying to say here is make yourself aware of the calendar and the passing of time in a ritualistic, magialistic construct. It can be quite difficult when you're first starting. You know, you're constantly checking moon calendars and moon phases. By the time you get to where I am now, you kind of just know. It becomes sort of a natural part of your life. You know what the moon phase is. You know what your next festival is. You know, it just becomes a part of your magical life as you go on and practice. So become aware of that. And yeah, basically it's just another part of sort of attuning yourself to ritualistic and magical energies, is learning to work with the natural passing of time, or the passing of time in the natural world, and how it affects things innately. So yeah, that is your magical calendar. What I would say is, obviously, you know, ask you to download Witchery, which gives you the brief intros onto how these things are celebrated and how to use them in a magical context. What I would say is don't just tune into them on your when you want to perform some sort of ritual. You know, it has to kind of become part of your daily routine, your daily life, to know what the natural world is up to and what is going on in the natural world, and not just as sort of a set of figures, a date on a calendar and a time on a clock. You know, what is actually happening, you know. So yeah, that is it. It might help if you want to get yourself a little separate calendar in your house and mark, or if you can get a lot of really good ones actually, and get a lot of witches' almanacs and calendars which have them all written on. And it's handy to have that somewhere quite visible for you, so it's not something you're having to go and seek out every day. You can just look at it and go. Of course, normally on the front page of the website, if I manage to remember to update it on time. I'm going to get better at it, honestly, I promise. It has a lot of it written on there for you as well. So you can also just check the website. Usually, if I remember to update it. Okay, so go have fun, tune yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.